All right, it's time for another episode of Comics and Whiskey. Today's whiskey is going to be Tullamore Dew again, just because I had some in my bottle, and I didn't really want to go out and buy a new bottle of something else when I got this. So before we kick it off, let's have a nice drink of this wonderful smooth whiskey. Drinking it straight again. All right, so we wrapped up Daredevil last week, and man, that was such a great series. We're going to move on into something else. This is an Image comic book called Hack Slash. Now, Image, if I remember correctly, ended up buying this title from a different company. I think it was called Devil's Due. And the pacing of this is a lot different, so you're going to get some cussing and stuff like that. And you can see on the cover here what they're going for with the, scantily dressed girl, and she's got the fucking skull on her crotch and all this other shit. So they're definitely going for a feel with this girl in a different look. And you got her buddy in the back. So what this is essentially about, this strip is basically about this girl who goes out and hunts killers, like serial killers or whatever. So she's kind of like the Dexter of comics, only she's goth and, a girl. So let's get to it. Also, this is not going to be on the Marvel app, just so you know, obviously being an Image comic. This is off of Comixology. So you might notice a little bit of a difference, but it shouldn't be too bad. All right, so we start off, and she's being tortured by this guy who looks like he's out of Hellbound Hellraiser 2, because all of his skin has been taken off. And he's got her strapped to a chair, and as you can see, he's taking off her toes. And he's basically just like trying to get into her head, trying to find out why she does the things that she does. Why is she out there hunting, serial killers when there's obviously better things that she could be doing. And while he's doing that, he's taking her toes one at a time. So down here at the bottom, he's like, hey, we can play psychologist if you want. I can be the psychologist and you can be the patient. Then he says, tell me about your mother. So we switch to this flashback here where young Cassie Hack is on a swing and these boys come up and they start giving her shit. It's kind of funny in reading this part. I was like, man, kids nowadays, like, this is no exaggeration, because kids nowadays are just complete jerks sometimes. Like, their level of meanness is just boundless. So this is right in line with that. And they basically start making fun of her, and they make fun of the fact that her mom is the lunch lady at the school, and they trip her and push her in the mud. And while they're doing that, her mom shows up looking all kinds of pissed off, telling the kids to get out of there and leave her alone. And, Cassie at the bottom here is trying to be like, it's not a big deal, whatever. So she tells her, that she shouldn't have left, and that, we only have each other in this world, and that she doesn't really want her getting hurt. And then they walk off. And these two knuckleheads over here look at each other all angrily like. We go back to the present now, and she's basically like, fuck off, I'm not going to tell you anything. And he just keeps trying to guess, like, what the deal is, And there's not really a lot of, like, substance in this conversation. Basically what they're doing in this first issue is, like, building her character. And he's doing that through this exposition, these questions of, like, why do you like to hunt serial killers or whatever? And then, of course, it gives her the opportunity to flash back. And here at the bottom right, you see that he takes another toe. She's not having a good day with that. So we flash back, and we're at the school where she's at with her mom. And her mom takes the kid that was abusing her, or not abusing, but giving her shit. And she's got, I don't know where she gets this axe from. Like, this axe is ridiculously big. And it looks like she's working in a kitchen of, like, human remains. Like, how did nobody see this shit? So she's got this lumberjack axe, and she's got this kid pegged. And she's just going to, like, chop his head off or something. And then, like, right here, the size of the axe is fucking ridiculous. I mean, that thing's huge. So Cassie's like, hey, don't be doing this shit. Like, I don't know, like, it's ridiculous. Like, why are you trying to cut this kid to pieces just because he was talking shit? So she goes and tackles her mom, and her mom is like, I don't understand. What's wrong with you? I did this for you. Then, of course, the cop shows up, and what does she do? Boom. The mom does a face plant right into the gruel, which I hope she wasn't planning on serving after this incident. Now we come back to Dr. No Skin here, and he's basically just saying, like, you've got this attraction to violence, and you're antisocial and all this other stuff. Again, just doing the same stuff again, kind of building her character and giving you a little bit of history while he's torturing her. And then at the bottom right, he says, do you have any friends? So again, we cut back to another flashback, and it's a subway, and these guys are sitting here talking about this dude who just got hit. You can see his face right here. he got he got smashed by the subway. And then we cut to Cassie and this guy who she calls Vlad. And I don't know, I don't remember why he wears the mask or what his deal is. I'm sure that's something they'll explain in later issues of this comic. And she's apologizing for attacking him because she, obviously looking at him, she thinks, holy shit, this is this guy called the Meat Man Killer, so I'm going to mess him up. Turns out it wasn't, and Vlad has nothing to do with the Meat Man Killer. So, hold on a second, let's take a drink of whiskey. All right, so they just basically talk and become friends that way, and that's how she meets Vlad, who is her sidekick in this storyline. At the bottom, he basically says, when you have a face that looks like mine, you get into trouble. And then at the bottom, she's like, no trouble or whatever. And she says, we can keep each other out of trouble. Just kind of a little joke between the two of them. But I do like the way that she dresses. It's funny. She's like fishnet body stocking or whatever the hell that is, with a little like sports bra looking thing. Now we cut to now, obviously, and this guy's trying to pick up on this girl at like a Starbucks or something like that. And then Vlad walks in, and he's like, hey, do you have any Wi-Fi access? I don't know whose Wi-Fi he's looking for, but then he realizes he means Wi-Fi, not Wi-Fi. So he sits down and starts plugging in this thing like he's trying to find a friend, and he's asking these people. This lady is like, hey, that guy's scaring customers. Go tell him to leave. So he goes up to Vlad, and Vlad's like, oh yeah, get me a coffee. So Vlad finds where her tracker is in this neighborhood. He's like, hey, is this close to here? And they're like, yeah. So then he bounces, and of course this chick and this guy, she's like, oh, you're my hair or whatever. And then we see Vlad here running towards Hack. We cut back here to Mr. No Skin, and he's talking some more shit, so he gets a nice foot to the ball sack. And then Mr. No Skin is like, hey, maybe you just hate all men. Like, where's your dad? Like that kind of thing. Maybe you've got daddy issues. And then we go back to then. And it's basically her back at her house, and the mom is saying how worried the girl is. And obviously she's younger here than when she was in school, and, her mom ended up killing folks. But she's basically saying, like, Dad's going to be home in any minute, so I'm not worried about it. And my assumption is, I guess he just never came home. I guess that's what that part's about. So Mr. No Skin here grabs her, and he takes the little grinder and puts it under her chin like he's going to start slicing her throat because maybe he's done with whatever game he's playing. And I really like this right here. This is cool how and I saw this in Daredevil too. So it's like a movie where they focus on the foreground, and in the background you see Vlad doing whatever he's doing. And then it switches, and the guy here is blurry, and then in the back you've got, him coming into focus. That's a really cool effect, and I see that more and more, and I just love it every time. So Vlad comes in, big old splash page of this guy getting his arms cut off. He's just like, whoop. Yeah, so that happened. He sits down, and Vlad's like, hey, what's going on with your foot? And she's like, man, don't worry about it, but I want this fucker. And she basically says, look, you want to know what's wrong with me? I'm really fucked up. And she throws him out a window because, why not? So later that day, they're at a hotel, and she's, going through her clothes that have been all bloodied and ripped up. And she's just, starting to feel the weight of the day. And Vlad's like, hey, man, this is dangerous. Like, I don't like you being the bait in these kind of calls. Then he opens the door. This is really cool. Like, she's all, she's a very, like, strong girl and has that tough as nails look. But here she's just, like, crying. And then I like the way they ended this was really cool. Well, this sequence was really cool. And I don't know that there's anything sexual between them or anything like that. And I think that's what makes the strip better. But good art. And that was just, I don't know. I like the way that they did that. Now we flip over to this guy who's in Northern California. Obviously not Fresno because he'd be driving away quickly. And he's looking for some file, talking about the research of some phenomenon that happened. But they're a little bit vague here. And then at the bottom you see he pulls out a Dr. Jack Hack folder, which obviously is like her dad or something. I'm sure they'll put that together later. And then in New York City, this guy just gets done finishing a concert, and the promoter's like, I wasn't gonna book you because you guys suck, but man, you really did some shit. And this guy here at the bottom, who's like a low budget Kiss member, says, I made a deal with the devil, haha. And then right here you see that he actually did make a deal with the devil because he's got this chick who's all tied up in the middle of a pentagram. And that is how we end it. So that was Hack Slash number 1. We'll stick with this series for a few, I don't know how many, maybe 3 or 4, just to get you an introduction to it. It's a series that I really enjoyed, and I think that going into October and Halloween, it's very apt because they do a lot of monsters and stuff like that. Anyways, thanks for joining me for another week. Let's take one more drink of whiskey here. Always tasty, and always the perfect time for a glass of Tullamore Dew. Thanks for joining me. I'll see you guys when I do this again. I'm not sure when it'll be, probably a couple days or so. And again, I don't really care if I get tons of viewers, just a few. People who like whiskey and people who like comic books. I always suggest that you go out and buy the back issues because it's always, better to have them in your hands. But if you just want introductions, that's kind of why I do this, so you can check this stuff out. And you don't have to, buy titles that you don't know if you're going to like. Anyways, take care, be safe, and I will see you on the other side.